Hello and welcome back to Nordic Testing Days. You're now in the room which is called Black Box, and we are aware that we're having some technical issues regarding stream quality. So at least we can be happy about the stream is there. We're making sure that you get more pixels out of it. Now we have, in parallel, we have 4 tracks, and this is one of them. And the pattern we will follow is quite simple. It is going to be intro, track, and Q&A. So during the track, you can post your questions into Workshop. There's a little button next to the speaker bio, Q&A. Press there, write your questions, and we as moderators will get them and ask them. Now let's get on to the speaker. So I hope, is Shey online? Hi Shey, how are you?
Hello. Very well, thank you. I hope you can hear me fine.
Yeah, sound is good, and everything is looking great for a change. So
Fantastic.
yeah, so you're having quite an interesting or challenging topic, I would say, parenting. So
Yeah.
how did you end up there?
Well, I talked a lot about leadership at meetups and things like that, and I realized the more I talked and thought about leadership, that I saw a lot of similarities between how I was bringing up my children compared with how I was leading teams and leading particularly newer members of teams. So as I saw that I was bringing more of my parenting skills into leading and a little bit of leadership skills back into parenting, that sort of clicked for me as the possibility of, okay, where are these similarities happening? And here's the talk, you know.
Really cool. So I was looking at the a little bit Googling around before the conference and checking out all the speakers and I noticed that your Twitter account has a pretty quirky name. It's 50 Grades of Shey. I was almost going to mix it up now. I think it's on purpose. So should we be aware of some quirky habits, or you a fan of the movie?
I've not even seen the movie, to be fair. It was just it was actually something somebody suggested one day, and I thought, okay, I'll keep that as my Twitter handle. Quirkiness. Well, I enjoy craft beer and playing golf and woodwork, so fairly straight down the line, I think.
I have to agree. So let's get on with it, I suppose. You ready?
Fantastic. I am indeed.
Let's go.
Okay. Welcome to Parenting and Leadership, a Leadership Handbook, or Leadership and Parenting. I'll let you decide over what the actual title is over the next 20 minutes or so. But first, a quick setting of the scene. Oh, I think I pressed it too many times. Okay. Where am I now and how did I get here? I've been in various leadership positions for over 20 years now. I've worked in over 17 companies and have been a director at 3 of them. I'm currently senior quality engineer at an Italian insurance startup. I've also been a parent for over 10 years. I have 2 children who are actually 11 and 7. There's a little bit of a typo there. The first time I planned on giving this talk was 2 Nordic testing days ago. So curse you, COVID-19, for allowing that typo in. And as anyone who can appreciate, who is a parent, I haven't slept much since 2010 when my son was born. But that's enough of that. Cast your mind back to the turn of the century. "21 years ago, almost to the day, my boss approached me and asked me to become test lead on the next game. I'd only been a tester for 3 months, but I was young and ambitious, and I'd seen how other test leads ran their projects. I was ready. And very shortly after I got the role, I realized I was not ready. My first leadership role was on the computer game Original War. I got given some testers, a launch date, and was told to get on with it. And there I stood, alone. No one to help me with what to do. I looked around. I'd seen other test leads, how they ran their teams. So I thought I'd do what they did. I got my testers, looking at the game design, playing the tech demo, and writing as many test scripts as possible. And then I read every script. I corrected the spelling and grammar and the test steps and pretty much rewrote all the tests. And then I added some of my own test scripts. When it came to testing, I micromanaged my testers' time and then jumped up and down like an irate baboon when the developers gave me a bad build. And generally, I was a bit of a micromanaging idiot. Looking back, it definitely was not the best introduction to leadership. Snap forward to 2010. Eventually, come on, Mr. Slide. Hang on. Come on. No, next slide, please. Snap forward to 2010. So much effort over the last 9 months. So much preparation. So much thinking. When I became a parent, I thought I'd made it to the big time. I was ready. Then very shortly after my son was born, I realized I was not ready. Next slide, please. Everything I thought I'd done being a parent pretty much went out the window after birth. After my son was born, my wife needed to be operated on. The operation took over 2 hours, and I was left in the maternity suite alone. Well, not alone. I had this baby, but literally I was left holding the baby. I just had this amazing promotion to being a dad, but no one was there to tell me what to do next. So there I stood, walking with my son around this empty, lonely, but thankfully warm room. I shushed him to keep him calm. I bobbed him up and down to help him stay asleep for 2 hours. Because that's what I'd seen other parents do. That must be the right thing, right? And when I asked what was going on, I got told to go back into the room and that my wife would be back soon. And so that's what I did. Looking back, it wasn't the easiest start to being a parent. Next slide. I'm just going to keep on going, and then hopefully we'll catch up the slides. And so on to the lesson learned. Promotion doesn't take your voice away. In the first moments of becoming a father and as a leader, I realized how clueless I was. But it wasn't the done thing in my life to ask for feedback, so I didn't. I think I would have been much better leader had I asked for feedback when I first started out. And being a parent has taught me all about asking for feedback. Although that wasn't instant, it took me 2 whole hours to ask where my wife was. So up to becoming a parent, I mainly got through life and leadership by observing others, emulating what I felt was useful and leaving what I felt was not so useful. This ability to keep my eyes open, this situational awareness served me well. But asking for feedback took years to start doing as a leader. It was parenting that taught me to ask for feedback from peers or other fathers or trusted friends. One of the biggest fears as a parent is getting it wrong with your child. So you find yourself constantly asking for feedback from other dads on what they do in various situations. In the workplace, asking for feedback can be daunting, which is why HR creates a process where you and your boss must feed back to each other in a formal way. Feedback is enforced. As a leader, though, as anybody, you have a voice. So why not use it? For example, in the last 5 minutes of a meeting, you could ask for feedback on what you could do better next time, or have lunch with someone in a leadership position and chat about your concerns or your ideas about your leadership journey. Next slide. Moving on a few years of leadership, picture the scene. I am a leader to a few testers on a development team with a new person on the team. We hold a planning meeting where I give everyone instructions on what needs to be done. No one questions what I've gone over in that meeting. The meeting must have gone perfectly, right? I mean, everyone must have understood what I said first time because they asked no questions. I am a meeting genius. But when I check a couple of days later, none of the work is complete. In fact, what little of work has been done is not up to my standards. And some of it isn't even in the user story. I mean, what did they get wrong? Why would they do that? As it turns out, it wasn't they who got it wrong. I need you to move forward a couple of slides, please, from there. Keep going. Okay, there we go. The one with the baby on top of the plinth, please. No, back. And again. Thank you. Back to parenting and how I learnt my lesson. There is a phrase called the terrible twos. There is a period around when a child is 2 years old. The clue is in the name. It's where a child seems very emotional. Tantrums are common, and they don't seem to do anything you want them to. Actually, for anybody listening, that doesn't change as they get older, but they don't seem to be doing what you want them to. Did you know there's a reason for the terrible twos? Around 18 months to 2 years, when a child has more awareness of their surroundings, they can move and interact in ways that they haven't been able to previously, but they cannot adequately communicate their thoughts and their feelings. And so they get frustrated, and frustration leads to tantrums. So how do you communicate with someone who doesn't know the same language as you, or doesn't have the same insights into a situation as you? Next slide. First of all, you have to learn to ask questions. Sorry, next slide, please. Thank you. First of all, you have to learn to ask questions. For a 2-year-old, this cannot be, "What is wrong with you?" or "Why don't you just get it?" And for your team, it can't be, "Does everyone understand?" or "I assume there aren't any questions." For a 2-year-old, you need to ask easy questions. The questions need to be focused on their immediate surroundings. They can be things like, "Can you point to me where you want to go?" or "Do you want to play a game?" Then you need to wait for the answer, no matter how frustrated you are, because it can take up to 5 seconds for a child to process the question you've just asked. In work, you need to ask open-ended questions. These are questions where there isn't a yes or no answer. For example, instead of "Do you understand what needs to be done after the framework is set up?" you could ask, "What do you think should be done after the framework is set up?" Open questions test the understanding of the person you're asking it to and help the recipient to actually think of what their answer should be. But it's not enough to just ask good questions. Next slide, please. Listening is incredibly important. It's no use asking a question they're not bothering to answer. I mean, we've all seen it. Someone asks you a question and then while checking their phone or looking at their computer screen. But that's not really what I'm talking about. As a parent, I had to learn to listen closely to my children, particularly when they started talking, as they couldn't form words correctly, or they would put weird words into sentences. So I had to listen to be able to interact with them. Listening, actively listening, is to me one of the most important skills to learn as a leader. In one-to-ones, listening to what is being said helps with engagement, and the person feels relaxed. Listening to what someone has to say in an open meeting space helps you to pick up on small comments which actually may be important. And in case you've not heard of it before, actively listening is the process where you listen to someone, maintaining eye contact and not interrupting or making any utterances. It's a hard skill to learn. I found it was really, really difficult because, there are always distractions. There's what's going on within my head, or something walking past the meeting room, or what the person is saying, I have the answer to, I have the solution right there, I can give it to you right now. But you can't. You have to sit and you have to listen and be engaged with that person. And so here's a tip. Prepare yourself to listen prior to the meeting, reviewing notes from the last meeting or from the meeting invite. And as an aside, by the way, if you put notes in your agendas, it really helps the invitees understand what's going on. So there we go. It's really helpful. Anyway, moving on. Minimize distractions by putting your phone on silent or turning it off and closing your computer screen. It just takes the distractions away. And when it's their turn to talk, only listen. Avoid taking notes, and you will get a better engagement from that person. It takes some practice, but will help you, as I said, engage more with that person. And as a bit, and it's not related to listening, follow up straight afterwards, after the meeting with that person, because it gets something off your to-do list and it also makes the person feel valued. Next slide, please. So how do you manage team members? As a junior leader, I used to be quite the micromanager. I've mentioned it earlier. I would give team members a task and then basically stand over sure they were doing it right. It must have been awful to have me over their shoulder the whole time. This was especially true with new or junior team members. I didn't want them to fail, so I almost try and do their homework for them. Conversely, if I was too busy, I'd blindly assign a task to the junior team member and hope that they would be able to complete it successfully. It was what was done with me when I started out, so I was just emulating what I'd learned. Looking back, I believe it was a fear of failure that made me a micromanager. I couldn't trust any team member to do what I'd asked to the standard that I required. And since I couldn't do the task myself, for example, a development task or an automation task, I was forced to delegate. And so I checked on them constantly to make sure they were doing it properly. Nowadays, I prefer to give junior team members smaller tasks so that if they don't complete it, it won't trash the application. And regardless of the outcome, we review how the task went and we'll either try it again or move on to a new task. And learning to trust that everyone on your team is a professional was difficult for me. But once I did, then my stress levels went down and I feel I became a better leader. Next slide, please. My way of giving junior team members tasks which would allow them to fall safely came directly from my son learning to walk. When my son started walking, I followed him around, catching him before he fell. You could say I micromanaged his walking capability. As he toddled and tipped one way, I'd correct it and keep him upright. Then I learned to let him fall. I mean, his bum was padded and he was very chubby, so there was no chance of him damaging himself if he fell. And at the age of 11 months or so, children are singularly minded in succeeding in walking. So he'd just get back straight back up and start walking again. And what's the use of someone never falling? They never learn to get back up and try again. Once I stopped micromanaging my son, he became more confident, more agile on his feet, and much more daring. Maybe I should have micromanaged him a bit more. Otherwise, I'd probably have fewer grey hairs. Anyway, as my children got older, I started to give them small tasks to teach them new skills. For example, cutting vegetables to go into a salad. You don't just give a 4-year-old your sharpest knife and tell them and a few vegetables and tell them to get on with it, do you? You give them a carrot, which is long enough for them to hold, and a blade, which isn't your sharpest one. And so it won't cut them. So I gave my son a dinner knife and showed him how to use it, and then let him get on with it without interrupting. And just for the record, would watch what he was doing in case he didn't do it safely. And I'm pleased to say he does have all 10 of his fingers for now. Next slide, please. So the lesson here is to let people fall safely. And that's right, fall safely, not fail safely. We use the phrase fail safely when speaking about ways to introduce new skills and technology. And I did until I read Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last, where he mentions it. Using the word failure has negative connotations. Something that has failed may cause pain or destruction. And if for example, if your application fails, it's crashed, there's something wrong with it, you need to fix it. So nowadays I look for ways to let my teammates fall safely. That way they have the opportunity to get up and try again. Next slide, please. And now there are some quick fire lessons as I'm going to be short on time. So here, be a coach and a mentor. Often these two can be seen as mutually exclusive. You're either a coach or a mentor. However, I see coaching and mentoring as being something more fluid. Depending on the situation, you can end up being either coach or mentor, or a bit of both in a session. Recognizing what the situation requires is where your experience as a leader comes in. Someone may just need you to ask some questions and listen to them to help them work out the answers. Recognizing what the situation requires. Others may need direct mentoring to improve their skills in some area. So you help them out. Putting together the three main leadership skills and having them there with you will help you be more effective and engaged as a coach and a mentor on your team. Next slide, please. Next, make it fun. If you're not making it fun, you're missing out. Parenting and leadership are both really stressful. There are so many moving parts. If you take either too seriously, you'll find leading a team or bringing up a child much harder than it should be. So learn to make things fun for yourself and for your team. As a parent, I've learned that getting children to do anything is impossible. I mean, leaving the house on time, getting their shoes on, getting a shower, it's impossible. So I gamify some of the situations which pits my children against each other, or we do something collaboratively. For example, racing to get a task done, or counting items into a box, which is a really good way to get Lego cleared up, by the way. As a leader, this can be done with, say, bug bashes or 30 days of testing, or lunch and learns, or mini conferences, things like that, which help take people away from their everyday life and make them more of a team and more engaged. Next slide, please. Keep going. Oh no, sorry, go back. My fault. And being okay with saying, I don't know that. As a parent, there are times when you feel alone and that the situation you are in is unique. I see that a lot on a forum called the Dads Net, which is a group made for dads. Through much of my leadership journey, it felt exactly like this. You can feel afraid to ask for help for a number of reasons. You can feel like you have failed, or you may feel like you'll lose trust from your team, or you may seem like a weak leader. Learning to ask for help or saying, I don't know, are two very powerful actions. As a parent, showing your children that you aren't the one with all the answers tells them that you are human and fallible, but you can turn it around into a collaborative exercise. My son and I often sit at bedtime Googling answers to questions that he has. For example, last night it was finding out what light speed is in kilometers per hour. Leadership is much the same. Saying, I don't know, but I will find that out for you and then more importantly, following up is really powerful. It gives you credibility. It engenders trust and strengthens your relationship with the team. And also asking others for feedback about you is important. People are always happy to help. And being inclusive strengthens the relationships and can help improve your life, your journey as a leader. When I started on my journey, I quietly emulated others I saw around me, but that wasn't the best way to go, as their style and processes often weren't suited to my situation. Now I ask my fellow leaders for feedback and help, as well as my teammates, and that helps me to become enriches my life as a leader and helps my journey. Next slide, please. And leadership and parenting are journeys, long, difficult, but very rewarding. As you go on your leadership journey, you will make mistakes. I know this because I've made many. But you'll be fine if you do the following. You trust yourself. You did well enough to get into a leadership position, so trust yourself to make the right choices. Keep your eyes open. By this, I mean observe yourself when you are in leadership situations. Test yourself. Ask what I've done better, or how can I be a better leader, or what one thing do I always do that I could do differently? And don't be afraid to fail. If you are pushing yourself, you will fail and you will fall. Just make sure you get up from that fall and learn from it. Next slide, please. And to wrap up, I thought I would leave you with the index page of the Parenting and Leadership Handbook. Chapter 1, Becoming a Leader. Learn to ask good, open-ended questions. Learn to actively listen and enable safe failure. Chapter 2, Coaching and Mentoring. Apply your skills from Chapter 1 and know that coaching and mentoring are fluid and can be one or the other or both in a leadership situation. In Chapter 3, Your Personal Growth. Learn to say, I don't know that. Seek out feedback from peers and your teammates. Test, trust, and challenge yourself to be a better leader. Next slide, please. And finally, I'll leave you with a quote from Confucius. Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Next slide. Thank you. Feel free to get in touch with me on Twitter or via email. I'd love to chat about this. Thank you very much.
It looks like you will be able to start chatting about it right away.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions up here. Maybe Harles will take the first one.
Thank you, Shey, for this nice comparison between parenting and leadership. I really enjoyed that. So the first question is about gamification. So how gamification works in diverse teams where team members are from different nationalities, age groups, and so on?
That's interesting. I don't really see much of a difference in gamification. You do have to maybe use the right process or the right ideas for certain situations, but the way I see it, every team is diverse. There is no such thing as a mono culture team. Everybody has their own biases, their own ideas, whatever they bring to the table, their own life stories, their own goals. So every team is diverse. So each game you play, you'll always get somebody who is totally into it and totally goes for it. And you'll always get somebody who maybe just would rather not be there. I think as a leader, it's important that you try and recognize those areas, and maybe, you know, if somebody's not enjoying the let's say the game that you've put together, maybe seek them out and say, okay, what would help you to engage better? This is my goal. I want people to engage more and have more fun. What would help you to have fun? I can help you to do that because that's my role. Oh, I've lost your sound. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. So you talk about failing safely, and as a parent, if you have a chance to raise a child, then I mean, both me and Harles, we are proud fathers ourselves as well. So
Wonderful.
actually, with every kid, you just get one chance. Maybe it's a long one. It's quite a few years, but you've got a few years to make an impact. Can you actually fail safely as a parent?
Absolutely. I think it's about it's two things. One, if you do something wrong, if you mess up with a situation, it's forgiving yourself. It's allowing yourself to say, okay, that didn't work. How do I do it differently? Or how do I change the way this relationship is going? Say, in years to come when my children are teenagers and we're butting heads together and I'm finding it's not working, and we're always yelling at each other, I like to think then I'll be able to assess myself and say, okay, why isn't the situation working? Why does it always lead to an argument? What can I change as the parent, as the leader, to take a different approach? There must be a way to improve this situation. And understanding that there is no sort of hard and fast rules. There's no, I've called this the Leadership and Parenting Handbook, but there is no one about parenting. Everybody is different, and so just understanding that at the start will help you to flourish as a leader and as a parent.
All right, there's one more.
Yes, there's always risk for over-provisioning. How do you deal with people who tell you, don't treat me like a child?
That's really interesting. I had that, and it's one of the areas one of the points I started reflecting on how I was as a leader. The situation was this person was always late to work, and they never really did the work that I wanted them to, and as a result, I had to more or less treat them like a child. And he did take me into a room one day and yell at me and say, "Don't treat me like a child." How do I deal with that? Well, first of all, you need to apologize, and then you need to work out, okay, so how can you need to change the situation, and the way you do that is through communication, through good communication. So you can say to them, okay, how would you like me to treat you? What can I change as a leader to help you to function better, or our relationship to function better? And you can frame it. You can say, in this case, hey, what I'm seeing is that you're coming into work late very often. And when I ask you to do a task and I try and give you a timeline, it's either late or it's not completed to a standard. Is there a way that I can communicate what I require to you so that we can get something better out of this? I hope in most situations that'll work. It did in this instance. I stepped back from the person. I said, look, I need to trust you as a professional. Let's try and restart this relationship and try and work on it. And for a while that worked out, and then then the contract ended. So, but just starting to have that conversation with people openly is really important. I think that's one of the things I've found over my time as a leader is, if you sit there in the corner as a leader and you grumble and you say, oh, nobody's doing anything the way I want it, or nobody understands me, well, nobody's ever going to do the thing the way you want it, or nobody's ever going to understand you. Whereas if you sit down and one-to-ones, for example, are two-way conversations. So you can speak to the person and talk about your observations and work on the relationships.
Thank you. Kaspar, do you have more questions?
Actually, I just heard we have a couple of more questions coming up, but we have assistants coming. The questions will come through a different medium.
Actually, I see some of those questions, so
Very good.
We can proceed.
Fantastic.
So what are the tips or when you need to give a negative feedback or even somebody?
You cut out a bit, but I understand. What are the tips for when you need to give negative feedback or fire somebody? Is that correct?
Exactly, yes.
Perfect. Okay. Wow. So giving negative feedback is never easy. It takes courage as a leader. It's one of the worst I have to do. And to give negative feedback, for me, it's about, so, you know, if you're feeding back to someone about something they are doing that's incorrect and needs to change, you need to be able to evidence as to why you're observing that they need to change. And then as a leader, because you quite often have a lot more experience than some of the people in work situations or whatever, maybe try and have a solution or suggestions or a process that will help that improvement. As for firing someone, I'm very lucky that I've never actually had to do that. But I imagine it would be much the same thing. When I've been let go from contracts because the contract has ended and it's not being renewed, the leaders that I've had who I respect have always sat down and said, right, this is what is going well, this is what can be improved. Unfortunately, we're not continuing with your contract, so thank you very much. If I was to fire somebody, that's kind of the approach I take. These are the areas that you do very well. These are the areas that unfortunately you don't, and that doesn't suit staying with this organization, and that's why we're letting you go. So at least you've given them something that they can work on to improve themselves for the next role.
Okay, I think we have one more question. So the question goes that how should we deal with people who don't work or are rude?
Wow.
Quite childish, isn't it?
How should we? Yeah, that's an interesting one. Well, the rude, I'll deal with them in reverse order. The rude one, it's down to letting people know that the way they are communicating with you is unacceptable. It can be a cultural thing. So some countries are very direct in the way they speak to you, and as a leader, I think you need to sort of keep that when you're feeding back to the person. But if they are just being rude and to other people, or sexist or abusive or anything, you have to take them aside and say that's not acceptable in this workplace. And that's the first approach for me. If they continue it, then you say, right, we need to speak to HR and have HR in the room. But first and foremost, it is saying, hey, that's not very nice. I don't really like how you're doing that. Please, can you change the way you speak to me or you interact with that person? And oh gosh, I've forgotten the first half of the question.
How should you deal with people who don't work? That was the question.
Who don't work? Oh my gosh. I think from that again, it's a case of saying, right, okay, tasks and you're not completing them. Is there a reason you aren't completing them? And sometimes it may be something like they don't know how to complete it, and therefore but they may be quite introverted and not have the confidence to come forward and say, no. I had to learn how to say I don't know throughout my career. So many people won't know how to do that. So sometimes they'll just sit there and not work. If it's somebody being deliberately obtuse and putting obstacles in front of progress, that's another matter, and that's where you need to sort of take it up the line and have first talk to them and say, listen, I need to take this up the line because your attitude and the way you're functioning in this team is not helping us to move forwards here. So I think we need to go one step further. But I think one of the underlying things that I'm saying here across most of these answers is it's about quality communication. It's about honest, open, and genuine communication. If you're not communicating with your teammates as a leader, they won't communicate with you because you're in the position of leadership. It's they will emulate you. They will emulate your style and what you do. So learn to be a good communicator, and you will have good communication reflected back at you.
Thank you very much, Shey, for the very interesting Q&A and also a wonderful presentation. It was brilliant having you here.
Thank you. It's very wonderful to be here. Thanks.
Thanks.